Welcome to Y-Stick. Tonight, when the sun goes down, you'll probably flip a light switch without thinking about it. The room will brighten instantly. Your heart rate won't change. You'll continue doing whatever you were doing. Reading, cooking, scrolling through your phone, it feels completely normal. But the real answer is far stranger. For almost every human who has ever lived, darkness wasn't simply the absence of light. It was the beginning of an entirely different world. A world where your eyes stopped being the most important sense. A world where every unfamiliar sound demanded attention. A world where survival depended less on strength than on caution. If you had been born just a few thousand years ago, sunset would have changed almost everything about your day. You wouldn't ask yourself what to watch tonight. You would ask yourself whether tonight was safe. Long before cities, long before electricity, long before even written language. Your ancestors learned one lesson over and over again. The night belonged to something else. That doesn't mean every night was terrifying, most weren't. But evolution doesn't reward creatures that ignore the worst possibility. It rewards creatures that prepare for it. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest. The sun slips below the horizon. The colors disappear one by one. The trees become silhouettes. The path you walked all afternoon suddenly looks unfamiliar. Nothing has actually changed. The forest is still the same, but your brain isn't. Millions of years of evolution trained it to become more suspicious whenever certainty disappeared. Darkness creates uncertainty, and uncertainty has always been expensive. A rustling bush could be the wind, or it could be a leopard. A distant crack might be a falling branch, or another human approaching. Waiting to discover which answer is correct could already be too late. Natural selection favored individuals who reacted before they had perfect information. False alarms were cheap. Ignoring real danger was not. That tiny imbalance slowly shaped the nervous system you still carry today, even inside a modern apartment, even surrounded by locked doors, even after checking that nobody is there. Your brain still asks the same ancient question. What if? Scientists sometimes call this the negativity bias. Your mind naturally gives more attention to possible threats than possible rewards. Losing your keys is annoying. Losing your life ends the game completely. Evolution understood that trade-off long before psychology gave it a name. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying how people make decisions under uncertainty. Again and again, he found that your fast mental system jumps toward conclusions before your slower reasoning has time to examine the evidence. You explain later. At night, that fast system becomes even more active. Vision becomes less reliable. Your brain fills the missing information with prediction. Prediction has always been faster than certainty. That is why a coat hanging behind a door suddenly looks like a person, why a pile of clothes becomes a crouching animal, why a shadow seems to move even when nothing actually does. Your eyes aren't broken. Your brain is completing an unfinished picture. Would rather imagine danger than overlook it. Because for your ancestors, the second mistake was far more expensive. Modern neuroscience helps explain why. Joseph Ledoux spent years studying how the brain processes fear. His research showed that certain warning signals can reach emotional centers of the brain before the thinking parts fully analyze what you're seeing. In other words, sometimes your body begins preparing for danger before your conscious mind even knows what Your heartbeat rises, your muscles tense, your breathing changes. Only afterward does your rational brain step in and say, "Oh, it was only a shadow." That sequence feels irrational today. Thousands of years ago, it was brilliant. A hunter who paused to analyze every strange sound didn't always get a second chance. The cautious hunter usually lived longer. The overly confident one often disappeared from the story. Fear itself wasn't the problem. Poor timing was. But darkness shaped more than fear. It also reshaped society. When daylight disappeared, the pace of life changed completely. Hunting slowed. Travel became dangerous. Long-distance communication stopped. People gathered together, not because they were bored, because being alone after sunset dramatically increased the risk of becoming vulnerable. Fire became the center of everything. Today you think of fire as a source of heat. Your ancestors thought of it as something much bigger. A wall. A signal, a weapon, a kitchen, a meeting place, a classroom, and perhaps most importantly, a promise that the darkness had not completely won. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient hearths dating back hundreds of thousands of years. These weren't random campfires. Many were rebuilt in exactly the same locations generation after generation. Families returned. Groups gathered. Children listened. Adults planned. Knowledge survived. The fire illuminated far more than faces. It illuminated culture itself. If fire protected the body, stories protected the mind. Once the flames settled into glowing embers, something remarkable happened. People talked, not about the day's hunting, not about gathering berries, not about sharpening stone tools. They talked about things that couldn't be touched. Heroes, ancestors, spirits, animals that spoke, mountains that remembered. The night became humanity's first theater, its first classroom, its first library. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent years studying the Jew/Honsi people of southern Africa, one of the last societies whose way of life still resembles that of ancient hunter-gatherers. She noticed something fascinating. Daytime conversations focused on practical problems: who found food, who repaired tools, who traveled where. But after sunset, everything changed. People told stories, they discussed relationships, they explained traditions, they debated morality. Darkness slowed the body but awakened the imagination. This wasn't entertainment in the modern sense. It was education. Children learned who could be trusted. Teenagers learned how courage differed from recklessness. Adults reinforced the values that allowed the group to survive. Long before schools existed, stories became portable survival manuals, not because every monster was real, but because every lesson was. Think about fairy tales: the wolf, the witch, the monster hide. Today they sound like fantasy. Thousands of years ago, they functioned like warning labels. Don't wander alone. Don't ignore older people's advice. Don't underestimate strangers. Remember your way home. The details changed from culture to culture. The purpose remained surprisingly consistent. Stories compressed experience. Instead of learning every lesson through painful mistakes, children inherited thousands of years of accumulated wisdom simply by listening. Culture became a second form of evolution. Genes change slowly. Stories can change overnight. That combination transformed humanity. It allowed each generation to begin where the previous one ended instead of starting from zero. Few animals can do that. Humans became experts at learning from people they had never met, even from ancestors who had died centuries earlier. That ability changed everything. But something else happened around those fires. Peoples. They watched shadows dance. They noticed patterns where none existed: a face in the smoke, an animal in the stars, a spirit inside the forest. Was this irrational? Not necessarily. Your brain evolved to detect patterns because patterns often predict survival. If every tiger leaves similar tracks, recognizing the pattern keeps you alive. If poisonous plants share similar colors, recognizing the pattern matters. The problem is that the same brain sometimes finds patterns that aren't really there. Psychologists call this epiphania. Your mind connects dots automatically. Usually that helps. Sometimes it creates illusions. Darkness amplifies this tendency. When information becomes incomplete, imagination fills the gaps. A branch becomes a snake. A distant howl becomes something impossible to identify. A flickering shadow almost seems alive. The less you know, the more confident. It sounds like a flaw, but evolution rarely produces perfection. It produces solutions that are good enough. Imagine hearing an unfamiliar growl outside your camp. You have two choices: ignore it or assume danger. If you ignore it and you're wrong, there may not be another morning. If you react and you're wrong, you've simply lost a few minutes of sleep. Natural selection consistently favored the second strategy. Better safe than sorry. That familiar saying may be older than civilization itself, perhaps older than language. This cautious mindset shaped human behavior in countless invisible ways. Groups slept together. Parents stayed close to children. People built shelters near one another. Communities formed because isolation carried enormous risk. Loneliness wasn't simply emotional. It was dangerous. Even today, your nervous system still responds powerfully to social connection. Being surrounded by trusted people reduces stress hormones. Feeling isolated often increases them. Your biology still assumes that survival depends on the group, because for almost all of history, it did. Darkness also changed time itself. Without electric lights, human activity followed the rhythm of the sun. Morning meant movement. Afternoon meant work. Evening meant gathering. Night meant recovery. Today, those boundaries barely exist. Artificial lighting allows. Watch movies until 2 in the morning. Answer emails before sunrise. Your ancestors couldn't do that. Their internal clocks evolved under millions of sunsets and sunrises. Modern chronobiologists study these biological rhythms every day. Your circadian rhythm isn't just about sleep. It regulates hormones, body temperature, memory, immune function, even mood. Light tells your brain what time it is. For hundreds of thousands of years, sunset reliably announced that the active part of the day was ending. Then, almost overnight in evolutionary terms, humans invented electric lighting. Thomas Edison didn't rewrite evolution. He simply gave your ancient brain a new environment to interpret. Your biology is still catching up. That's one reason blue light from screens can delay sleep. Your brain mistakes it for daylight. It receives conflicting signals. The environment. Light says, keep going. Your nervous system hesitates between two worlds, one ancient, one modern. The conflict isn't your fault, it's history living inside biology. But perhaps the strangest part of all is this. Darkness didn't only make humans more fearful, it made them more curious. Look up at the night sky without city lights. Thousands of stars appear. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river. For ancient people, this wasn't an astronomy. Questions emerged naturally. Who put those lights there? Why do they move? Where does the sun go? What happens after death? Some of humanity's earliest religions may have begun not inside temples, but beneath open skies filled with impossible numbers of stars. Wonder and fear often appeared together. One reminded people how small they were. The other reminded them why they needed each other. In that strange balance, civilization quietly began. Today, you know exactly what hides in your bedroom. A chair, a backpack, a pile of clothes, nothing more. Yet if you wake suddenly at 3 in the morning, your first reaction probably isn't logic. It's instinct. For a brief moment, your heart may beat a little faster. Your eyes search the darkness. Your ears become unusually sensitive. Only after a few seconds does your rational mind quietly take over. Nothing's there. Go back to sleep. Those few seconds are a conversation between two versions of your brain. One evolved over millions of years. The other has existed for only a tiny fraction of human history. Evolution moves slowly. Technology moves incredibly fast. Electric lights became widespread barely more than a century ago. From an evolutionary perspective, that's less than the blink of an eye. Your nervous system hasn't been redesigned. It has simply been dropped into a completely different world. Streetlights erase the stars. Predators rarely roam outside your home. Doors lock. Emergency services are only a phone call away. Objectively, nighttime has never been safer. Subjectively, your brain isn't convinced, because evolution doesn't optimize for accuracy. It optimizes for survival. If your ancestors occasionally became frightened by harmless shadows, they lost a little sleep. If they ignored a real predator hiding in the darkness, they lost everything. Natural selection remembered only one of those mistakes. That ancient calculation still shapes your emotions today. It explains why horror movies rarely happen at noon, why abandoned buildings feel more unsettling after sunset, why a single unfamiliar noise sounds louder in the middle of the night than it ever does during the afternoon. The darkness hasn't changed. Your expectations have, and expectations shape perception. Neuroscientists have repeatedly shown that the brain is not simply recording reality, it is constantly predicting reality. Every second, your brain builds a model of what it expects to happen next. Your senses don't create that model, they merely update it. Most of the time, those predictions are remarkably accurate. Sometimes they are spectacularly wrong, especially when information is incomplete. Darkness removes information. Your brain replaces it with educated guesses. Most of those guesses remain invisible. Occasionally, one reaches consciousness. A shadow suddenly resembles a face. A curtain appears to move. For one brief instant, an ordinary room feels unfamiliar, not because your senses failed, because your brain did exactly what evolution trained it to do. Look for danger first. Ask questions later. Ironically, the same ability that once protected your ancestors also gave humanity one of its greatest gifts: imagination. The capacity to picture something that isn't physically there, the ability to simulate tomorrow before tomorrow arrives, to imagine a better hunting strategy, to invent a tool before carving it from stone, to picture a shelter before building it, to tell stories about worlds that never existed. The brain that imagined monsters also imagined mathematics. The brain that feared unseen predators eventually imagined invisible atoms. The same predictive machinery that sometimes mistakes a shadow for a threat also allows scientists to predict eclipses, engineers to design spacecraft, and artists to create entire worlds from nothing more than ideas. Darkness didn't merely challenge human intelligence, it forced it to grow. Every evening around ancient fires became an exercise in imagination. Children pictured heroes they had never met. Hunters replayed the day's mistakes inside their minds. Elders imagined better ways to survive the coming winter. Generation after generation, those imagined futures slowly became reality. Civilization wasn't built only with stone. It was built with stories. It was built with shared imagination. It was built by brains that refused to stop predicting what might happen next. In a strange way, darkness became humanity's greatest teacher. It taught caution. It taught cooperation. It taught storytelling. It taught planning. And perhaps, it taught humility. Every sunset reminded your ancestors that there were forces larger than themselves. For thousands of generations, they couldn't command the night. They could only prepare for it. Today, you command the night with a single switch. You illuminate streets from space. You carry the equivalent of thousands of campfires inside your pocket every time you unlock your phone. You can travel across continents while it's dark outside. You can work through the night if you choose. But despite all of that, your brain still carries echoes of campfires, echoes of forests, echoes of distant growls hidden beyond the light. Those echoes are not signs that evolution failed. They are evidence that it succeeded, because the brain inside your skull was never designed for modern life. It was designed to survive long enough for modern life to exist. The next time you hear an unexpected sound after midnight, the next time a shadow briefly catches your attention, the next time the darkness feels strangely alive, remember that you are experiencing one of the oldest conversations in human history. A conversation between certainty and uncertainty, between instinct and reason, between the ancient world and the modern one. Most of the time, reason wins, but instinct always speaks first. Not because your brain is broken, because it remembers. It remembers nights when fire was precious, when families slept close together, when every sunrise meant another day survived. Those memories are no longer stored as stories. They are stored as biology, hidden beneath every heartbeat, every reflex, every glance into the dark. So tonight, when the sun goes down, you'll probably flip a light switch without thinking about it. The room will brighten instantly. Everything will feel completely normal. But now you'll know that, for almost every human who ever lived, that simple moment would have felt nothing short. And somewhere beneath the comfort of electric light, a tiny part of your ancient brain will still be watching the shadows, just as it has for hundreds of thousands of years. If you want to keep understanding yourself, subscribe. And if you watched this far, what do you want to understand next?